So welcome friends to this Wednesday evening Dhamma discussion and meditation practice. And this week we are continuing our questions and answers session. And some persons have sent in by email previously, sent in some Dhamma question. And then in the mailing I sent out last week, I sent out the 2 verses that I recommended to reflect on for this evening's Q&A also. So I hope you're all able to get that mailing. But those 2 verses are the verses 5 and 6 in the Dhammapada. And but first of all, I am going to answer a question that was sent in by email from a person. And then after that, we're going to go over these verses, Dhammapada verses. And then you can ask some questions on the meaning of that. And I'll give a brief kind of description of the meaning of those verses. Okay, so this question that came in from email, this person is saying, I'm noticing that sometimes I am faced with a choice, entertainment and escape, or feel the uncomfortable feeling that makes me want to escape or entertain the mind. And so he feels an uncomfortable feeling that wants him to escape, but his option is to lean towards, knowing that probably he should do meditation instead of, indulging in some entertainment. So he has some, sort of issues, tension between that. I'm sure everyone has that also from time to time. Maybe there's some movie on something and it's the time to meditate, and then you're going back and forth, should I do that or not? So his basic question is it healthy to go cold turkey on giving up, entertainments or other sort of sensual indulgences as a kind of to escape from one's whatever boredom or to satisfy that desire, and knowing that he should also be meditating, or not to neglect the meditation. So how can I approach this sort of situation in a balanced, compassionate way? Now, as you know, when for lay people, entertainments and things like that are not sort of forbidden. When you go on a retreat, if you go to a monastery or if you go on a long retreat, then of course sometimes you may take the actual precept about not indulging in entertainments and singing and dancing and watching shows and things like that. But that's a temporary thing. But so for lay people, that is a strong, lure, temptation, because we've been probably doing that much of your life, and especially if you live with other people. Now, of course, we know that in the practice of Dhamma, we should follow the middle path and to avoid the extremes. So just because you're meditating or you're leading a Buddhist life, even though the ideal would be to let go of all those things, Realistically, the average person is probably not going to be able to do that. And there could be some strong reactions from the unconscious mind if you just try to go cold turkey, so to speak, and say you're not going to do it. And then you're going to encounter, this kind of mental tension. So how to approach that in a balanced way? You start reducing the amount of times you want to, have that sort of escape into some pleasurable, experience, or, that kind of thing. But not to the neglect of your meditation. So if you have a certain time during the day when you do meditation, even if something comes up during that meditation time, there's a basketball game on, or a sporting event, or something else, then each person is going to have to decide. Anyway, sometimes we might not be able to maintain that schedule. It's true that relatives come over or other kind of things. So we, lay people do have to be flexible. And each person has to make that decision for themselves. But you have to remember that a given inch take a mile to the mind. And so you have to, if you're really serious in the practice, because I think you all know that, when you try to meditate, the 5 hindrances are which block your ability to gain deeper meditation. And one of those hindrances is, of course, sensual desire. If you sit down and in your meditation, you think, what movie I'm going to watch tonight or tomorrow, or this and that. If you make it a habit of that, the mind is always going to keep doing that. So anyway, we have to have compassion for ourselves too, and knowing that, especially, if you're still living a lay life, that is what lay life entails, until you're going to decide you want to lead a more monastic life, or let's say live by the 8 precepts. Now, there are a lot of lay persons that do keep the 8 precepts in their daily life, or at least quite often, or at least on uposatha days. So you could decide, like the 4 the new moon, full moon, quarter moon days, or once a week, you would not do any of those things. Let's say observe the 8 precepts. So that could be one way. And then the other days, comes up, you might do that. So, each person is different, but we have to understand how our mind is very tricky, and very clever in coming up with all kind of excuses and reasons why we should let ourselves indulge in that. And again, some of that is not that bad, as long as it doesn't go against any of the major precepts. And then also, I guess, is a adjunct to this person is also interested in how you find balance with keeping up with the news versus being content and sinking into the suchness of the present moment. How do you go about having a balanced news diet? Well, sort of the same guidelines would pertain to that as well. So we know we easily get addicted to news, especially if there's some important or new event is going on, whether it's politics or it's like the war going on, or election news and so on. And I would say, just to keep abreast of the news. I mean, I also keep abreast of the news, but it's for not to inform me that samsara is still there. I well know that samsara is still there. But sometimes you can get some from current events when you're giving Dhamma talks, especially as I do, and things like that. You can use examples from current events to illustrate certain points about greed, hatred, and delusion, or about impermanence, and things like that. So again, we shouldn't deny ourselves, keeping up with that. But again, you have to have mindfulness, and maybe like each day say, okay, for 15 minutes or 20 minutes, I'll look at the news headlines. If you want to do that, and kind of just and then stop at that. Discipline not to let that you see something else pop on your screen. Oh, let me look at that, and so on. So that is the same way. It's good to keep up on the basic news, but you have to know your own mind. If you hear something, it's gonna excite your mind. If you hear something that especially political issues or some other catastrophic events, if you're somebody who's very sensitive and gets easily upset about what is going on out there in the world, then I would say, then don't listen to too much of it. But if you understand, okay, these things are happening, and they've been going on for thousands of years, just in different ways, and not to get really upset about it, then it may not affect you too much. Okay, so that's about that. Again, following the middle path, and you have to know yourself, how easily you get disturbed, carried away by those news items or other entertainments and so on. Okay, so now those are the two questions that came in by email. Now we're going to look at the two verses I had recommended. So these two verses come from the first chapter of the Dhammapada, the twin verses. Hatreds never cease through, in quotes, more hatred in this world. Through love alone they cease. This is the eternal law. So in the words that for hatred, actually the word in Pali is averena, or vera, which means actually non-anger, so without anger. So, sometimes people get angry and not necessarily turn into hatred, but it's translated as hatred's there, but because usually anger does turn into hatred if it's not checked. So the hatreds never cease through more hatred in the world. But you can see that generally in the world, that is what happens. Somebody gets angry and then you get angry back, and then these hates between, whether they're hates between persons or groups of people, people who believe differently than you do, or of course, people that cause you harm, and so on. We have, developed this anger and then hatred. Actually, hatred is an evolution of a few different stimulations. Like first you get annoyed by something that you hear or see, or and then if you don't check that getting annoyed, you start to get irritated by it. And then if you don't check that irritation, then that could evolve into anger, and then using some rough language or some other unwholesome actions. And if that anger is not checked, then it turns into, having hatred towards certain persons and so on. And then, it keeps going back and forth. So it's caught up in the law of karma, and where we react and react. And that's why, between certain groups of people and so on, that, one person reacts with anger and the other one reacts with double the amount of anger, and then that other person then reacts with more. So it never ceases. So the meaning of that is it never ceases. Only through love alone do they cease. Now, the love basically is the non-anger. Vera is anger, avera is without anger. So this love alone, when they use the term love, I mean, love is often misunderstood. Basically, it means just non-hatred. So we don't have non-hatred or anger towards persons. It's not necessarily we love them like you say you love your certain people in your life, or we love everybody. That's a kind of, people say that, but it's more or less that we don't, we let people be who they are, and we don't have ill will or anger or hatred to them. Now, of course, in Buddhist practice, the antidote for anger and hatred is metta. So through the practice of metta, if you have an angry temperament or hating certain persons, even persons who harmed you in the past, or even within families, there's lots of animosity and grudges and ill will between even family members and so on, unfortunately. And it's the ego that prevents us from really developing this metta. And so metta is the antidote. And metta basically is achieved by understanding through wisdom, and understanding that every living being, we're all karmically interrelated, going back even many, many, many lifetimes, and in different ways. And there's an analogy in by the Buddha saying that, if look at the grains of sand on a beach, and you can't really count them up, the grains of sand on a large beach. So in the same way, you can't count up the number of times that we've been each other's mother, brother, father, sister, aunt, uncle, relative, friend, enemy, and stranger in the course of the infinite cycles of samsara. And so that means that we're all basically karmically interrelated. And so the idea is that just as your mother, now that you have your mother in this life, most people would look upon their mothers with kindness and so on, because of the way they were brought up. And so we should see each living being as having been our mother at one time. So that's kind of a basis for the practice of metta. Now, people who don't believe in that, of course, well, that's why they didn't get caught up in anger and these kind of things. So, but it's only through the the development of metta and compassion, metta and karuna, loving kindness and compassion, and really practicing the Dhamma. And not only that, but practicing the whole Dhamma, the whole practice of the Eightfold Path, which includes, the Sila, Samadhi, and Panya, and all those aspects of the Eightfold Path, right understanding. This is the way that gradually we can understand the interconnections and the law of karma, and how as long as we keep on reacting, we're always going to be being caught up in the tug of war between our actions and reactions, and the suffering. That's the whole cause of suffering. So, and that's the eternal law. Basically, it's the ego that prevents us from having metta, because that sense of self, whenever it's threatened, and because of its clinging and attachments, there's always going to be the potential for resentment and ill will arising until that sense of our ego has been weakened to a very great extent, or at least until one has entered the path and the higher stages of realization where the ego is permanently sort of weakened. Only then will one be able to, and that natural vibration of awareness, the natural present moment awareness, which is the original vibration of our consciousness, that's beyond self and I. Only when we start to realize that at deeper levels will that process of metta really be able to more naturally come to us. So anyway, that's sort of a meaning of this verse, that it's only through, because we see that hatred is the cause of so many things, and it's because of clinging is the cause of hatred, actually. So that's why normally greed, hatred, and delusion is usually, when they talk about the three poisons of the mind, greed is mentioned first, but or delusion, before hatred, because it's because we have a sense of ego and we're attached to something. When somebody threatens that with a different viewpoint, or threatening what we want or believe in, then that's when the mind reacts. And that's why it's very difficult to overcome hatred if you still have a lot of greed. And also the ego. Okay. So now let's go on to this next verse, which is kind of similar, it's kind of connected. Verse 6 in the Dhammapada. Others do not know that in this quarrel we perish. Those who realize it, their quarrels are calmed thereby. So now these quarrels could be associated with, of course, anger and hatred, right? That's when people quarrel. They get caught up in quarrels. From quarreling about things, then they get angry if they can't, convince the other person. Then, those quarrels turn into anger, and that turns into hatred. So the others do not know that in this quarrel we perish. That means that we're all subject to death, and we could die at any moment. And people are quarreling even up until the time they die. And when you die, where's that quarrel going to go? Of course, according to our understanding, it may arise again in a future lifetime if you haven't resolved some of those issues. But the meaning of this verse basically is that many people within one family or between different families and groups of persons, they quarrel, between the different racial groups, religious groups, political groups, and others, because of their clinging to some kind of opinion or belief. And of course, that is the ultimate cause of suffering within the Dhamma teachings. And knowing that these are just opinions, and that people are not going to give up their opinions, they're clinging to them. So, and most of the quarrels are because of attachment and clinging to material objects. As I mentioned, opinions, viewpoints, and they're very difficult to let go of. And it's only through deep reflection and higher realizations of impermanence, and especially no self, will a person change their opinions and stop quarreling with others. So this is quite similar to the verse that we went over, that I went over just before this. It's only with developing the wisdom, and especially to know self and see in yourself that you're clinging. A lot of people quarrel, but they want to convince the other person that whatever they're quarreling about, their opinion or idea about it is right. And all quarrels about trying to convince the other person to give up their beliefs and believe the way you do, and vice versa. And we know that that's not going to happen. And so a person who understands the Dhamma, it's up to them to stop quarreling with others. In other words, people get in quarrel because they get feedback. Somebody mentions something and you say, well, I don't believe that. I think it's the other way. And then then you get caught up in some quarrel. So, there's a saying, it takes two to tango. And so even the Buddha had a lot of people came to the Buddha, and these various ascetics, because they heard what the Buddha taught about no self and about austerity and so on, and they didn't believe that, and they came to refute the Buddha and to quarrel with the Buddha about whether the self is eternal or whether it's not eternal, whether the world is eternal or not eternal, is the soul the same as the body or different or neither or both, and all kinds of spurious arguments. These ascetics used to come to the Buddha and start a quarrel with him. But the Buddha said, I don't quarrel with the world quarrels with me. But anyway, the Buddha used to say, would teach him the Dhamma, and then most of those people would find out that the Buddha was speaking the truth, and most of them would give up their wrong viewpoints. But anyway, so, but especially when you know that, death can happen to anybody at any time in any place. And what is the use of getting caught up in quarreling with people? Usually it's about unimportant things. Sure, there are certain important things that go on in the world, and of course, in today's political climate, there's all these differences of going on with so many important topics. I'm not going to go into them, but you all know that. And of course, the ballot box is the way that we settle quarrels. That's the only way. You have to go out and you vote, but without upsetting your mind by getting into arguments with other family members or others. Let them believe what you do or not, but you go out and vote your conscience, and that's about all we can do, really. So therefore, those who understand that we're all going to perish, their quarrels are calmed thereby, and that the Buddha had another good, because in the Buddha's day, there was monks who got caught up in quarrels too, and quarreling about different rules, and thinking, well, we shouldn't have to follow these rules. And other ones say, oh, yes, you should. And they get into quarrels about them. And then even the Buddha, or talking about other worldly matters. And the Buddha said, whenever two the monastics come together, or a group of monastics, either talk the Dhamma or keep quiet. Because it's interesting, right speech also, out of the 8 precepts, the 8 lifetime precepts, 4 of them are about speech. 4 out of the 8 precepts are concerning speech. And only one is a couple of concerning the body. So it shows you how, we get caught up in, it's so easy to get caught up in the wrong speech and getting quarrels and so on. So it's best just to keep quiet when that happens. Okay, so therefore, I hope some of you had a chance to look at some of these and maybe reflect. And if anybody has any questions that have come up about these verses, then you can, we'll see if there's something there in the chat box. Yes, Frank, you can email me your questions. This might be better. Yeah. So looks like there's no chat questions. If anybody wants to raise a hand, you know how to do the yellow hand and the reactions thing down below on your screen. There's a reactions. If you click that, you'll see a yellow hand. You click the yellow hand and it's supposed to say that you want to ask a question. Is that right, Prashant?
Yes, and Bhante, there is a question in the chat.
Is there? Which one?
Just after the first message.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, I didn't see that. Is there a place for forgiveness in the second verse? That is, when I realize that I could die at any moment, shouldn't I want to let go of any resentment or quarrel immediately, which might look like instant forgiveness for just about any harm? I'm wondering if forgiveness fits here. Absolutely, absolutely. It's a very, forgiveness and metta actually are sometimes kind of paired, that like I often recommend to people, like every day in the evening before you meditate, to practice anybody who crossed you during the day or caused you some irritation that you're kind of holding on to. You can do an M&M at that time, actually, even if it's just 10 minutes after the thing happened, rather than chewing up on some irritation from something. Practice an M&M, take a few deep breaths, and try to let go of that, forgive that person, or forgive yourself if you maybe did something unmindful that you're kind of blaming yourself about. Don't let it fester in your mind. Now, if you can't do it, shortly after the thing happened, then in the evening, you can go back and then forgive anybody who might have done something that you have some resentment about, and forgive yourself, and then practice metta. You can't practice metta if you're holding on to resentments and so on. So at first, yes, forgiveness is a important part of that. Often it's not directly mentioned, but yes, you have to be able to forgive people before you can actually have metta toward them. Otherwise, it's going to be a kind of a superficial type of metta. So that is a good practice. Anytime something happens, even during the day, as soon as you have a few moments after that it happened, or maybe an hour or two, once you calm down, reflect, and then, forgive them. Knowing that we all make mistakes, so everybody makes mistakes. And, the old saying in the Christian saying, I think, whoever is guilty free, throw the first stone, whoever is without guilt. Right? So, we've all done stuff that maybe, we shouldn't have done. So we would like people to forgive us too. So therefore, practice that by, practicing the M&Ms during the day, but especially in the evening. And then practice the metta and then do your meditation. So that's a good way a good kind of program for your evening practice is, before the meditation to contemplate what happened during the day. If you're holding any resentments, try to forgive that person and forgive yourself, and then send out metta to that person, and then extending that, and then hopefully by that time your mind will have gotten relaxed, and then you can carry on with your whatever other meditation that you might be doing. Okay?